we've been saying this for a year. The open source models are going to surpass the proprietary models. And that's exactly what's happening. And that gives you sort of powerful enough tools to really run these agents, connect them to smart contracts, connect them to a user's wallet, and let it take actions for you on chain, right? That's the cool thing that we're getting to. Is it's not just, oh, I can run a cool chat model on my own computer. It's no, I can connect it to all of Web3.
Welcome to the Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad here with Nomadic from 4RC. Today's show spotlights a network for powering smart agents called Morpheus. In this episode, David Johnston returns to talk with us about how Morpheus makes it possible to finally onboard 1 billion people to crypto, what you need to know to stay involved in Morpheus, and the latest looming threats of draconian regulations against open source AI. But before we do, just a quick word from our sponsors who make the Edge podcast possible. Introducing Flat Money, the first decentralized, delta-neutral flat coin built on Base with sustainable yield that's completely untethered from legacy finance. Because DeFi needs an uncensorable based unit of currency. You can mint unit with RETH, which is held in the protocol's shared liquidity pool, where it's borrowed by leveraged traders. As a leveraged trader, you can deposit your margin collateral and go long on RETH. If you're trading in the perpetual futures market, you'll pay unit holders to open leverage positions. If you're holding unit, you'll earn yield from liquidations, borrow rate, and trading fees. Preserve your purchasing power and offset your exposure to crypto market volatility. Learn more at flat.money. Tired of hopping between tabs, searching for new tokens before the hype catches on? Try MATCHA.XYZ, the DEX aggregator from 0x. Matcha connects hundreds of DEXs so you can trade millions of tokens and find fresh new drops. Matcha works out the best route to save you money on every trade. Swaps are free and Matcha has everything you need to trade on-chain. Gasless swaps, limit orders, and cross-chain, all in one place. Search Trade Done at MATCHA.XYZ.
Introducing the MANTLE Liquid Staking Protocol, MANTLE LSP, a permissionless, non-custodial ETH liquid staking protocol deployed on Ethereum L1 and governed by MANTLE. With MANTLE LSP, users can stake ETH to instantly receive mETH, earn yield and accumulate rewards the longer you stake. mETH is the value accumulating receipt token that will give you access to expanded yield opportunities. Stake and watch your yield grow with MANTLE LSP.
Unlock liquid restaking and get exclusive rewards on KELP's road to 1 billion TVL. Restake Steph, ETHX, and native ETH for the liquid restaking token RSETH. Get exclusive rewards on top of regular rewards with KELP miles and Eigenlayer points. Use RSETH to earn with over 25 DeFi partners across 9 L2s. Learn more at kelpdao.xyz/restake.
It all started so simply with CryptoKitties and Maker on Ethereum, but quickly became complex with more applications and many chains. Today, everyone agrees UX issues are the biggest blocker standing in the way of crypto adoption. Introducing Avocado. Multi-chain UX redesigned from the ground up. The first wallet to abstract networks, accounts, and gas. One gas tank to pay transaction fees on all chains in USDC. And native access to INSTADAPP's powerful, custom DeFi strategies. Avocado, one wallet to rule all chains.
All right, let's introduce David Johnston, an open source contributor to Morpheus. David, welcome back to the Edge Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back, guys. Thanks for having me.
A few months ago, we had you on prior to the launch of Morpheus, and there was this bootstrapping period that you were building up to. That 90-day period is coming to a close. During that time, I believe upwards of 100,000 Steph was staked to take part in the bootstrapping period. We'll refresh folks on what all of that means. And really just bring you up to speed again on the importance of Morpheus and, again, how it acts as this network for powering smart agents. So, David, do you want to take over from there and just tell us a bit more about what is Morpheus? Maybe give us the elevator pitch and we can go from there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's been just incredible since January. The bootstrapping period started on February 8th, and to see 100,000 staked Ethereum come in just kind of blew everybody away. I mean, there were no expectations, right? This is a fair launch. There's no team. There's no foundation. There's no company. There's no CEO. There was no PR. There's nobody issue any PR. This was entirely word of mouth. And to see that many people in the community wanted to support decentralized AI was just incredible, right? And so, yeah, it's been amazing to watch from February 8th, and the bootstrapping period ends on the 8th of May. And that's really just the beginning, right? That's just when the tokens start unlocking and people can put them into, Uniswap on Arbitrum, right? And have a market price. But this concept of taking your yield from the staked ETH, putting that in and earning Morpheus tokens, that keeps going, right? For the next 15 years, right? It's a very long-term project and supply curve. So people can keep earning more every day that they keep their ETH staked in the Morpheus contracts. So yeah, it's been really incredible. And just sort of, if you want to think about Morpheus, think about it as a platform for smart agents, the same way that Ethereum is a platform for smart contracts, right? The ETH Foundation doesn't write the smart contracts, right? The people at Uniswap and Aave and Compound do, right? In the same way, Morpheus is not training models. It's not an inference network. It's just giving people the platform and the tools they need to deploy smart agents. So if you're a fan of Akash or BitTensor or any of those projects, Morpheus is your best friend. It is consuming all of that compute and those cool models that they're training with these smart agents, right? So it's the demand side to the supply that everybody else is creating with these cool decentralized compute networks. So that's kind of the context, is this concept of smart agents has really taken off. And there's just been so much progress since we last talked. I mean, Llama 3 dropped, right? That's the first open source model on par with GPT-4. Like, people thought, oh, that'll never happen. Like, we've been saying this for a year. The open source models are going to surpass the proprietary models. And that's exactly what's happening. And that gives you sort of powerful enough tools to really run these agents, connect them to smart contracts, connect them to a user's wallet, and let it take actions for you on chain, right? That's the cool thing that we're getting to. Is not just, oh, I can run a cool chat model on my own computer. It's no, I can connect it to all of Web3, right? And I can give crypto, which has really had trouble with interfaces, a easy to use interface where you just tell the agent, what do you want to do? I want to stake my ETH. Great. Here's Lido, push this button on MetaMask, and you're done, right? That's the future we're getting to really, really quickly. So just got back from the Decentralized AI Summit. That's the other thing. There's been a big community event almost every month since we talked in Austin, at ETH Denver, all over the country, all over the world. There've been meetups talking about Morpheus and this whole concept of smart agents and decentralized AI. So yeah, it's been a wild time since we last talked, but excited to kind of get back up to speed.
So recently I had to create rules, basically some ground rules for a Little League team. So my son's Little League team, I used OpenAI. I go in and I typed in give me 7 to 10 rules, use a somewhat stern but friendly, empathetic voice. And it was hilarious because it spit out some fantastic rules to give these 8-year-old kids. The funnier thing was when I passed this out, many of the parents, some of which know me, were like, did you write this? Because this doesn't sound like you at all. They said it honestly, they were kind of worried, who's the hardo who wrote this? And is this guy going to be coaching the kids? Anyways, it's such a simple example of the power of AI. I mean, I could have spent, probably 30 minutes to an hour on that and I write it out. Well, when we look at DeFi, DeFi is so much more complicated. In some cases, even the simplest example of just trading requires multiple steps. And that's normal for those of us who have been using it for years. But I think this has been the unlock for me with Morpheus, is that this decentralized network for smart agents, the buzzwords might confuse folks, but if you're new to it, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's allowing you to take advantage of agents that are, imbued with intelligence through AI, and then they can act on our behalf. But I think the issue is, and David, maybe you can call out some of the ways that it differentiates. There was a rise of like Unibot protocols earlier in I think it was mid 2023. And they were exciting to folks because you could get into Telegram and you could basically just follow like simple sorts of directions to do typical sorts of DeFi transactions. That said, it's all centralized. I mean, I guess I don't understand every nuance of it, but like there was a clear dependency on Telegram at least. And so that was really scary to me. And so I'm thinking of Morpheus as replacing that sort of infrastructure in the future and being able to build all these really powerful DeFi consumer-friendly applications. But yeah, anything else to note in terms of like that vision for like the future UX of DeFi, like how that gets unlocked with these AI smart agents?
So I think that's a really important subject to cover, right? There's a difference between what you're describing with the centralized versions versus the decentralized AI infrastructure that's coming out now. First of all, understand like Morpheus is your personal AI. It's not a company's AI. It's not a government's AI. It's like your personal AI connected to your wallet that you control with your data and your prompts, right? And so that's the first key is like everybody's going to have a personal AI, right? The way we have a personal phone, the way we have a personal computer, for the same reasons, you're going to want a personal AI, right? That's on your side. And then think about it as a delegator. It connects you to other agents that might be useful. Okay, here's a swapping agent, and I'm going to, make it easy to go across all these chains and do a complex swap or stake my ETH or whatever else. But that's sort of the beauty is when you create a permissionless network and people are going to be able to publish these smart agents on Morpheus, then they're discoverable by your personal AI. So you don't need 100 different interfaces. You can have one personal AI that connects to all of these smart agents, right? And all it has to do is really understand the intent of what you're asking for. And it can match that to, they want to do staking, they want to do trading, they want to send some money, like whatever that is. The real breakthrough is being able to use human language, right? No technical terms, no complex, jargon. Just tell it what you want to do, right? We talked about last time, that's like that Google moment was for the internet in 1998. You got away from directories and typing in IP addresses and you just told the machine what you wanted. It gave you great results and you just clicked on the top thing, right? That's the interface that this is getting to. So if you download Morpheus today, you can say, I want to send ETH to this person. Right, great. Connect your MetaMask, push the button, done, right? And that's just sort of like the first iteration of what's happening. So as people release more and more powerful agents every day, you're going to be able to sort of have more and more capabilities and tools, and it's just going to automatically match you to those agents. You don't have to download something new. You don't have to learn a new tool. You don't have to understand how it works. It just works, right? And I think that's really powerful. So the idea of a personal AI that you own, that's totally open source, you can run it locally if you want, or the other concept is in Morpheus, it's a network, right? So if you decentralize the compute, maybe you don't have a big GPU, but you want to make some cool images or you want to generate a video now with AI. Great. Like there's tons of people who will offer inference, right? Maybe they're running on Akash or they're training models on BitTensor or whatever. Like they can then connect that to Morpheus, right? And offer those services to all the people using the system. And that's exactly what we're starting to see is people planning and building and launching interfaces on top of Morpheus, right? So the expectation is the testnet will probably be next month in May for the decentralized compute. And this has been pioneered by Ryan at Lumerin. A lot of people probably know that protocol for decentralizing hash power on Bitcoin. It's the same architecture for decentralizing inference for AI, right? They already had contracts all written on Arbitrum. Like, it was perfect. They're like, we're going to copy those and put these over in Morpheus because we need to decentralize all this AI compute in the same way, right? So anybody holding a Morpheus token, which are called MOR, right? Anyone that has a MOR token has a right pro rata to that inference on the network, right? So it's like hodling for inference or staking for inference, however you want to think about it. Like, that's really cool. You don't have to spend the token. You just have to hold it to prove you're part of the community, and you get access to that compute. And all those compute providers are getting rewarded with Morpheus tokens too, just like the capital providers, just like the coders, just like the people building smart agents on top. And that's something I really love about Morpheus is it's got such a broad reward base. Like, so many projects only reward capital, proof of stake, or compute, proof of work. But what you really need is to reward coders and builders that are actually providing this, right? That's usually the missing piece. And that's one of the things that got me really excited when I first saw the white paper last year in September, when the anonymous developers dropped it, I think it was September 2nd. It's like, oh, this is a whole system from front end all the way to back end. And it's neutral. It's not owned by any protocol. It's not run by some company. It's owned by the community. And so I think those principles, sort of getting back to those principles, is really exciting. So, at the Decentralized AI Summit just a week or two ago, like, people were announcing, we're going to use the Morpheus approach, right? We're going to do a fair launch. We want to adopt these smart contracts. And so the community is starting to call those MOR 20. It's like the MOR 20 standard for use these smart contracts, leverage the yield, right? And it protects people, right? Their Ethereum is never at risk, right? They can pull it out after 7 days whenever they want and go put it in a different project, right? So it gives people that freedom of entry and exit to say, this is the next thing I want to support, right? This is the thing I want to bootstrap into existence. And so I love the idea of sort of generalizing that approach with MOR 20 so that people can, almost as like an evolution, like you were saying, but from the old days of ICOs, right? Which you had to hand a bunch of money to a team and hopefully they issued a token, and there were a lot of risks. But now that we have yield from Ethereum, from staking, it's like, okay, this is a way less risky way for me to support a project. So I'm going to hold the Ethereum anyway. I might as well stake it and put the yield to use. So yeah, it's been wild. The sort of people are now building on that concept, and it's generalizing. So all those contracts, you don't have to, do your own audits. There are already 6 audits of the Morpheus contracts. So you can use a basis that's already rock solid and it's been tested with hundreds of millions of dollars of capital versus spend 6 months doing that again yourself and taking a bunch of risk.
David, so much in there, but I actually want to just back up just a little bit, because something that we talked about in our last discussion was kind of the why of all this. Like, what are the other motivating factors pushing kind of the Morpheus mission? And we spoke about this White House executive order that looked very scary and still does, to my knowledge. But where is that? Is that still kind of impending doom for the whole AI sector right now? Like, maybe you can speak to that as far as what are the ramifications? When is this set to take effect?
So this is July 26. The executive order says the Commerce Department has to make a determination if open source weights, right, which is just a database of numbers, constitutes a weapon, right? They refer to this as dual use, right? You can use it for civilian purposes or munitions and weapons purposes. And if they do that, it's basically a callback to like 1991 when they tried to outlaw encryption for email, right? And famously, when they did that, it inspired Phil Zimmermann to release PGP, right? Pretty good privacy, the encryption standard. And that sort of made this idea of banning math impossible to enforce, right? And so, yeah, I think that executive order from last October lit a fire under the AI community, right? They really hadn't been focused on peer-to-peer or Web3 or decentralization. But all of a sudden, the stuff that we've learned in crypto the last 15 years applied to AI, right? So yeah, step by step, they're implementing all of those things. People are like, oh, they'll never do that. Like, they're doing it. Like, they've announced there's going to be KYC now for every data center user. So if you enjoyed KYC for your money, welcome to KYC for your data. Because if you want to implement a restriction like nobody from China can use a US data center to train an AI model, well, you have to know who's from China. So you have to check passports and IDs and all these things, right? There's a registration process coming together for Homeland Security. So you train a new model, you'll need a license to release it. And they've set the bars really low. It's like 10 billion parameters, which is like 20 gigs. Like, your laptop could hold, that permissioned model, and this is above the permissionless level. And so It's all this stuff with the registration and the approval of models. So this is coming into effect step by step as the regulatory agencies sort of go through their process, right? Commerce Department had a comment period where, you could email them a letter if you didn't like the rule and you wanted to opine on it. And I think that closed a few weeks ago. So when that guidance comes out, I don't know, right? It kind of just puts a cloud over anybody running centralized AI because most of the rules are pointed at companies. It's like companies training models, companies doing this. You need a safety committee. You need a license, right? But none of that really applies in a decentralized context. It's like how Bitcoin came about, right? They sort of crushed every predecessor to Bitcoin, but then this thing showed up where there was no company, right? And it was just a protocol. Oh, and the hash power is somewhere over in Asia. Nobody knows, right? And that's what we need to get to is a fully decentralized model for AI. And we're rapidly getting there, right? People are moving onto Akash and other decentralized networks in mass because they have a bunch of GPUs. They want to monetize them, and we're going to find out which jurisdictions are going to be friendly to that. Maybe you can't do that in the US starting in July, but you can do it in London or Dubai or Singapore or somewhere else, right? It's exactly what happened with crypto. But most of the major foundations ended up in Switzerland or Singapore or friendly jurisdictions, right? And so the important thing is that it's built in a way where the users can get the benefit. They don't care where the model's trained. I don't care where the inference is run, right? As long as they get the benefit. And honestly, it's sort of created this bifurcation, right? Where there's going to be these big companies like Microsoft and Google and OpenAI, the people who paid for that executive order, right? The ones that lobbied for it, they're going to get the holy water sprinkled on them and they're not worried about the cost of the KYC, but it's going to crush all their startup competitors, right? Anybody who's still running a centralized AI company is a dead company walking, even if they don't understand that yet, right? And on the other side, you can have fully decentralized models that are built on open source, right? Grok is open source since we last talked. Now you've got Llama 3, right? So the open source stuff is really taking off. And what I would point out is compute from crypto dwarfs the private companies, right? If you looked at the amount of GPUs mining Ethereum before it switched to proof of stake, it's 50x what was used to train ChatGPT-4, right? So if we align the incentives, there's no shortage of global compute that's willing to do this for a reward, right? And that's what we're seeing with Akash. That's what we're seeing with BitTensor, right? And then Morpheus comes along and it creates these agents that can consume all of that compute and those cool models and agents that are being built, right? So it's the demand side to the supply side that these networks are creating. So yeah, it's going to be wild to see how it goes. I don't have any prediction or crystal ball on, exactly how the regulations come down, but they're not looking too friendly. And so it really helps to be building a decentralized system that will continue to operate no matter what silly rules they come up with about how they're going to regulate or ban math. It's probably true, and people often tell me, oh, well, this is losing the courts. Probably. But it took Phil Zimmerman from 1991 to winning in the courts in 95 to the government finally rescinding the restrictions in 1999. So yeah, it's probably unconstitutional, but it may take 5 or 10 years to fight that battle. But fortunately, crypto's a lot more resources than it did back in 2013, 2014 when something like the Bit license came out, right? So hopefully there'll be champions that have a lot of resources that are willing to fight that good fight in the courts. But in the meantime, we have to be able to continue making progress regardless of how long it takes to, define language and math as legal in the US, right?
David, we talked a little bit about this before, but maybe just highlight the importance of Meta releasing Llama 3, which is like a model that's kind of achieves parity with GPT-4, its closed source counterpart. Maybe just explain what this means, and I guess the importance of more of these open source releases prior to this, draconian measure taking effect.
No, I mean, it's huge. The models have been catching up with the proprietary versions very quickly. Even a few months ago, they were 80% as good, 90% as good. And now they've sort of reached 100% parity with the performance of something like a ChatGPT 4, which is considered like the gold standard, right, for current AI tech. So it's huge because one, it's cheaper. Like, why would you pay 10x for the API from OpenAI, right, to run their proprietary model when you have the same performance for 10 times less on your own hardware or hardware you run in a data center? And so just on a cost basis, like, this is a huge breakthrough because they no longer can say, oh, well, open source models, they're just, they're toys, they're not serious. Like, this is really a level of performance where you can build serious, interesting tools. So it's a huge unlock. And the rumor was Llama 3 was going to come out in July. So it looks like they kind of released it earlier than they were expecting. They did a 8 billion parameter version. You could run on a laptop, something like that. There's a 70 billion parameter version. And they're still training a 400 billion parameter version that it looks like will totally blow ChatGPT 4 out of the water, right? And so hopefully they'll get that out the door in the next few months. Because we've sort of like, even if the regime comes down tomorrow and cracks down in July, we've already got models good enough, right, to build a solid foundation for decentralized AI. And if we have to spin up new model training in London or Singapore or somewhere else, we've still got the tools that we need in the meantime to do 99% of the use cases, right? And that's the critical thing here is sort of achieving that escape velocity. So I was so happy to see Llama 3 drop. I haven't used Facebook in many years, and I didn't predict Mark Zuckerberg being, the open source hero, but, it's in his interest, right? He's not running one of those proprietary systems. So why not use all his GPUs? And apparently he has the most GPUs of anybody. He's got like 300,000 H1s or something crazy. And great, bring it to the world, open it up for everybody to use. And so I think that's so cool. And we're going to keep seeing new models get released. And also it opens it up for the community to improve that model, right? There's something called fine tuning. We're like, okay, I'm going to make a version of Llama 3 for math, for coding, for Web3, right? And I'm going to fine tune the weights for that use case. You can't do that with a proprietary model, right? It's only whatever they'll give you in the API. But since it's open source, the weights can be downloaded by anybody. We're going to see Noose and others, I'm sure very soon, release versions of Llama 3 that are fine tuned for all those different use cases. And that's why open source is so powerful. You don't just get the use cases, that fit only a mass market that a corporate's willing to release. Like, you can have 100 flavors that are useful to all these different people. So yeah, that was a big deal when that happened. Elon moving into the open source realm with open sourcing Grok. Like, you've seen the big players really start to move in the right direction. And so your holdouts are really just Microsoft, OpenAI, and Google at this point. And everybody except for OpenAI is releasing open source models of smaller level, but not their pristine, sort of larger models. So yeah, it's going to be wild. But now that we've got those tools, like, the race is on. Everybody has implemented it. It's already live on a Kosh, right? It's already been implemented in some of the beta testing I'm doing for people that are building on top of Morpheus. So yeah, it didn't take more than 2 or 3 days to make its way through the whole open source ecosystem.
I was just Googling that executive order, and I think this is, just a sign of where we are as a society in terms of the type of news I know we consume here in the United States. The way that it's framed, and I was searching through the whole first page of results. If I'm looking at the right executive order here, it's framed as such a positive, and this is to defend us, as a nation, to realize the promise of AI and avoid the risk. We need to govern this technology, Biden said. In the wrong hands, AI can make it easier for hackers to exploit vulnerabilities in the software that makes our society run. I honestly have been struggling with whether I was looking at the right executive order. This is back in October 2023. Pretty sure I'm looking at the right reference, because it's just a totally different story. And I would love to assume, put on my conspiracy theory hat, that, everyone's in cahoots with each other. But really, for me, it probably comes down to just laziness, a lack of understanding that there are There are folks that are really they're just regurgitating like what the bill is and all of the wording in it because of all of the lobbying that you referenced that these big players put forth to get this bill, to get this order in motion. So anyways, really, really concerning. Hopefully people start to understand the importance of why AI needs to be open source. And, I think why Morpheus is a great example of that, Llama 3 as well. I want to go back, though, to some of the, what you need to know about Morpheus, given that the bootstrapping period is coming to an end. During that time, folks like Nomadic and I have been staking stETH, and that allows us to earn a portion of the MOR emissions while, the network is still brand new. So what's next then? I guess maybe you can also refresh us with what are the high level tokenomics. I believe there's around 42 million more in total supply, but that's going to be emitted over many years. What do you need to know about the token supply? How does the emission change for us as users after this 90-day period?
So great question. Yeah. TLDR, 42 million. There'll never be more than 42 million more in existence, right? That's the cap. It comes into existence. It started at 14,400 more per day, right? And instead of a traditional halvening, right, every year or 4 years, it just decreases by a little more than 2 more per day. So there's a decay rate that takes it up that curve, right? So in the first 5 years, about half the tokens are emitted, right? In the first year, I think it's a little more than 5 million of the tokens are emitted. And importantly, again, there's no pre-mine. There's no team tokens. There's no free MOR. Everybody that owns MOR earned it from staking, STETH, or by providing code. Soon they'll be able to earn it by providing compute, like we talked about, or by building smart agents on top of Morpheus and the community directing rewards to them, right? So if you're holding MOR, you're going to be able to stake the MOR and point those rewards at your favorite project that you want to see rewarded, right? That's a whole other thing we haven't even gotten into yet is, okay, I can use my MOR to get free AI compute. Great. I'll hold it just for that. But, I get to stake it now and I can point those rewards at the next project, the next smart agent, the next website I want to see built is really cool because you get rid of the committees. There's no treasury. There's no politics. There's no sucking up to some core contributor or person running the DAO. It's literally everybody holding MOR is going to be able to say, this is the address I want to support. And those rewards will go directly from the protocol to that project and its address. And if they're using the same MOR 20 standard, right, it goes into the Uniswap pool, it provides liquidity, and they don't have their MOR at risk, right? Again, it's just like the model is for ETH. The model is for MOR. So you're taking your principal, you're pointing at something and getting the new token in reward, right? And this reminds me so much of the early days of ETH. What did people do with their Ethereum? They used it to support cool projects that were going to build on Ethereum, right? So why do I hold a bunch of MOR? It's because I want to support all the cool projects building on top of Morpheus, and I never have to lose my principal, right? You're just creating a yield on top of Morpheus with that staking mechanism and pointing it directly at those projects, right? So you skip all the ICO messiness, you skip all the centralization, and you go right to replicating this fair launch mechanism that Morpheus used for all of these projects. So these projects will be able to take, MOR 20 and, their community can provide them staked ETH and they can get staking rewards and yield directly for MOR holders, right? So those are sort of the two phases as that gets implemented. The first version is just for staked ETH, and then the contracts will get updated for staking MOR, right? So we're really just at the beginning of this process. And, people have been staking ETH on mainnet Ethereum, but they'll be claiming their MOR tokens on Arbitrum. And that's really important for a few reasons. The fees are so much lower, right, on a layer 2 like Arbitrum. And for a use case like, AI, you don't want to be paying huge fees every time you move around the MOR tokens, right? And so I think that's a big advantage. And if you look at the volumes on Arbitrum, like it's starting to approach mainnet, right? The L2s are in aggregate starting to approach mainnet volumes, which is amazing to see. And so, yeah, you'll be able to claim it. You'll take your same MetaMask wallet or whatever you used to stake your ETH. You go into the same dashboard, to push that claim button, get your MOR tokens on Arbitrum, and then the same day on May 8th, a Uniswap pool will go live, right? It'll take some of the yield that's accrued the last 90 days, and it'll take some of the MOR tokens from the protection fund. It'll match those up, and then you have deep liquidity. It looks like it'll be more than $1 million worth of ETH day one, matched with 50,000 MOR tokens. So that'll sort of kick everything off. There's deep liquidity, and remember, in the Morpheus context, all that yield continues going into the protocol and liquidity. So it's just going to get deeper every day as that ETH buys more out of the pool, becomes an LP in the pool, and then keeps increasing the depth. So, I mean, at the current rate of staking, it might be $5 or $10 million this year, right? The next 12 months worth of depth in the pool, which is great, right? Because you start off on the right foot with a decentralized exchange. You don't have to, go to Coinbase or any centralized place. You can go straight onto Arbitrum with low fees at liquidity. So yeah, that's kind of the things that are going to roll out, but there's so much going on between the companies and projects and open source agents, announcing they're going to use MOR 20 to the Morpheus staking that's being implemented. So there's all these pieces that are coming together. So yeah, it's going to be very busy the next few months.
David, just to summarize then, so let's assume that the liquid bootstrapping period has concluded. I go into the Morpheus app dashboard there. I'm going to claim more tokens that I've earned. Those are going to show up on Arbitrum in the same wallet address as what I used on mainnet. Can you remind us, though, so would I potentially keep staking that stuff? I still can earn some emissions, right?
Just a little bit less, because the decay rate's only 2 less more per day, right? So that curve's still going to be emitting. There's a little more than 1 million Morpheus tokens now in existence. The next 90 days, it'll approach 2 million. The first year, right, it'll be about 5 million. So it really continues. It doesn't change anything for people that want to continue staking and earning more. They can do that. But here's sort of the interesting game theory that will play out, right? As soon as there's a Uniswap pool, now there's a price where I can just take my ETH and buy more, right? And if the price is higher on the pool, people will probably rather stake it and earn it at a lower implied value, for trading their yield for more, right? And so it'll be, I have no idea how that's going to play out. It's going to be really interesting to see those mechanisms. You'd think that they're going to close that gap over time, right? If it's cheaper on the pool, I'm going to take it out of here, I'm going to put it in there. But there may just be a lot of people who want to hold the ETH anyway, and they're cool just getting more over time, right? I'm certainly in that category, right? I want to keep my ETH, and I want to be able to use it for additional projects, but I want to keep earning more. So I'm just going to keep mine in the staking pool, right? But if somebody just wants to show up with some ETH and buy some out of the Uniswap pool, more power to them, right? So it'll be really interesting. The secondary markets are very high at this point, but they're fairly illiquid. And I've tried to tell everybody, like, be careful with secondary markets. Like, I don't know how, they're not always well built, and they have a lot of risks. The safest thing to do is if I can own the key and I can hold that more myself, right? And so most people have just been, staking ETH, right? And waiting for May 8th. But yeah, it continues. Those rewards continue. And the whole idea is this has created a new crypto primitive that I'm calling automated recurring revenue, right? Or automated recurring rewards, right? ARR. Just like Uniswap created AMMs, right? This is creating a new way where people can create a sustainable source of funding. So for a project, instead of doing a one-time token sale and they raise a few $1 million of ETH and then spend it to zero, and if the project doesn't take off before, they spent all the treasury, it's over. Instead, they can just invite their community in and say, hey, we're all holding ETH anyway. Point your rewards this way, right? And you're going to have the same number of ETH you started with. So you might as well support this next cool project, right? So it creates this automated recurring revenue. I think that's such a cool way of sort of solving the problem of how you automate rewards and revenue in crypto, because we've never had that before. Because crypto is a push mechanism, not a pull mechanism, I couldn't set something up and be like, oh, I want to pay that every month, right? Without like pre-funding the whole thing, right? But now that I have yield, I have a way of doing that, and I can peel off that yield and point it at something I want to support or something I want to subscribe to, So I think people are going to take this model and start doing public goods, start doing memes, start doing all kinds of subscriptions. Like, what is software as a service? It's all just subscription revenue, right? And all of a sudden, instead of paying every month, I could just stake some ETH. I would just do that, right? Because it doesn't feel like I'm paying anything because, I was holding the ETH anyway. And now I'm getting this free service in exchange for my yield. That's sort of a way to expand crypto rails to all of Web 2, where they're doing software as a service payments for APIs and other stuff like that. So this is a really broad application, but I think it's going to start mostly with projects that want to launch on Morpheus, right? People that are crypto native and understand the yield mechanism and, kind of grow from there. But it's going to be really fascinating to see.
DeFi enables a whole new world of trading and yield opportunities. Sometimes we all wish we had a little bit bigger of a budget so we can make the most out of it. That's why we created Blueberry. Blueberry lets you access the best opportunities on Ethereum all in one easy-to-use terminal. You can access 5x, 10x, or even 20x your money in one click, more than any other lending market, so you can maximize your earnings. Only on Blueberry.
David, just one more question or a few questions here to just clarify for those of us that claim our MOR tokens. On that day one after the bootstrapping period, if you stake MOR, is the MOR being paired with staff that or like ETH that has been earned? Did you say, is that actually being used to create liquidity in Uniswap? And then also, I don't know if you have the detail on this yet, but when that Uniswap pool is created, I'm curious, like, do we know like how the price is dictated? Like, in other words, when you seed it, there's an implied price there then, and then the market takes over from there. Because like Nomadic and I have been tracking more on Whales Market, and this is a platform totally disconnected from Morpheus, but it's a fun place for folks to be able to speculate on airdrops, trade points, trade tokens before they actually go live. So that's been trading around like, let's say $208 as of this podcast. That's an implied network value, FDV, of 8.7 billion. So that's exciting. I think I'm concerned like any early user on day one with like impermanent loss. So if I stake my MOR, one, is it being used to create an LP paired up with like some staff in the treasury? Two, is there any sort of like, am I guaranteed to be able to withdraw that MOR later on? Or could there be some impermanent loss?
That's a great question. So let's take that apart piece by piece. So Morpheus and the rollout has like 4 phases. And we're in phase 1 right now, which is capital and coding rewards, right? As soon as the decentralized compute goes live, that's phase 2, right? And compute providers can start receiving rewards, right? What I was describing with staking MOR will be phase 3. Maybe that's June, maybe that's July, and you'll be able to point your MOR to reward projects that you want to reward on Morpheus, maybe a smart agent or something like that, right? There'll be a whole marketplace of things that people have launched, right? And so that uses the same model at phase 3, right? The emissions of MOR from staking MOR uses the same model as ETH. So you're always going to be able to take that principal back. You're just directing the yield, right? Exactly the same model as the staked ETH, right? Sort of extending that same capability to anybody that wants to build on Morpheus. Now, for those that want to dive into the details, this is a great write-up. I think the guy's handle is Chasing Dreams. that he put up on GitHub, which is Morpheus request for comment 09. And I can post you guys a link, but you can read about the whole standard process for creating the Uniswap pool. 54% of the yield is used. The rest sits in the pool at lower price bands. That whole description of how the AMM gets bootstrapped is all written up in the Morpheus request for comment 09. So that's up on GitHub, so everybody can see how it operates. I don't know what the current calculation it is. It's like $40 to $60 or more is like the implied starting price of that yield matched with that many more. But the free market's going to do whatever. It could be a lot less. It could be nothing. It could be way more. We don't know, right? And like you said before, likely the difference between the OTC markets and Uniswap will probably close, and who knows when it becomes over time, right? But that's sort of the function and mechanism of how it works.
David, the MOR 20 fair launch, I guess, primitive that you guys have built in-house sounds really interesting to me. And I'm curious, if you can share any details with teams that are developing on it now. You don't even have to name them if you don't want to, but what types of things are you seeing built?
Well, I mean, first of all, huge contributions coming in from, the folks like Lumerin, right, to build, the decentralized router and extend that to Morpheus is awesome. And then, we're seeing a lot of projects, I think they're going to make their announcements right before the MOR token goes live, but it's projects building, agent interfaces, it's projects doing proof of inference, it's projects, building all the different parts of the ecosystem. They're like, oh, I want to use that fair launch mechanism. I've got a community of people that want to support this with yield from their staked ETH, right? And so I think that's true. Just so many people in crypto, your options have sort of been, I'm going to create a foundation and I need $1 million and I have to go to Switzerland and, all these things. Or, I'm going to create, some DAO, but, that comes with a lot of process and bureaucracy in of itself. And so, to have an option that's literally just push a button, right, and generate a copy of these contracts. You're not changing anything about the smart contracts. And you might put in different weights, right? We're going to 50% reward to capital providers and 50% reward to coders. Whatever makes sense for their project, they can do that with the MOR 20 standard, right? But the contracts stay all the same. And so you don't have to rerun the audits. Have you guys talked to auditors lately? There's a months-long backlog. If you want to, get an auditor, it might take you 3 or 6 months, and it might cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And here, the Morpheus community has already done 6 audits of the smart contracts. It already built, beautiful dashboards for people to use. And you just end up inheriting all of that infrastructure if you use the MOR 20 platform, right? And so I think that's going to be compelling, especially as Morpheus gets extended to additional types of yield, to more chains, right? There's already proposals to put it on Solana and Base and all sorts of other chains, right? So you're going to end up with this generalized infrastructure that works across the chains, across different types of yield. And that's a lot to build for a single project, right? When all of a sudden you could just hook in and have access to this huge community that have already proven they want to support open source projects using this fair launch mechanism, right? And like we talked about before, MOR 20 also, it protects the capital providers. They're not trusting some central entity with a treasury or their capital or any of that, right? It creates an easy way for them to provide the yield without exposing their ETH position, right? And that to me is just, it's a smarter way to build out crypto projects compared to the old ICO model or something like that. So, I think more than anything, it's creating this playbook of best practices. You don't need a pre-mine, right? You use the emissions like this. You don't need, all this centralized infrastructure or even a treasury, right? That's the thing people don't realize about Morpheus. Where'd that, 100,000 staked ETH go? It's still being held and can be withdrawn anytime by the users, right, who are providing the capital. And where does the yield go? It goes all into protocol and liquidity. There's no wallet holding that's going to, use it for something else other than protocol and liquidity. So it's going to go right into the Uniswap pool. when it goes live, and we'll continue doing that every day. So building, like, it's the old phrase, right? Google used to say, don't be evil. And with, crypto, we say can't be evil, right? And so it's like, don't rug people, or like you can't literally rug people, right? I want to make it impossible for a bad actor to rug anybody, right? And the only way to do that is to remove custody, to remove treasury, and create one of these frictionless models, like MOR20 and the Morpheus community has proven. Right? That's what we have to get to. And I think we can, right? And we're going to end up with something where, it's so much safer, and it's going to attract a lot of people because, like, oh, I want to do that. That's the way to do this and not get burnt, right? And that's where we need to get to as an industry and as a community, is build systems that are safe by default. I don't have to know everything about their smart contract. I don't have to have read 50 papers. If I just know it's MOR20, then I know it can't be rugged. I'm going to keep my principal. There's no pre-mine. Like, all these best practices are going to get implemented. And if you're using those contracts, you're safe, right? And somebody can always fork MOR20 and do their own thing, but then you break the audits. Then you're not going to get in the dashboard. I don't know what you changed about the contract. Like, I'm not touching that, right? As long as it's MOR20, then I know I have this safety. And that's what a lot of people want, is they want the upside, but, they don't want to take the risk, right? This gives them an option of doing that.
Yeah. And I think if you're going to be launching on MOR20, like, you just have this added benefit that you called out. You're kind of immediately tapping into the entire MOR community. And if you're one of those early projects, you're probably going to have a lot of attention on you. And we're seeing kind of the TVL that MOR attracted, like Morpheus attracted. So, an overused term in DeFi, but you can see the flywheel beginning, and it's kind of reminiscent of some of the incentive mechanisms that we've seen in like Curve or Velodrome or some of these like DeFi AMMs, where you can kind of like put your weight into something. Like, if you're like, these are the rewards I want, well, okay, I'm going to stake my MOR with this cool AI agent project because I've been following it and it looks really interesting to me. And, you can kind of stake your claim on like what interests you, which is like, I think a really interesting mechanism. But all the safety elements that you call out too, like, again, we talked about this beforehand, just kind of like the flaws with ICOs. Even though I'm fairly pro ICO, this is like that next iterative step to hopefully something a little bit more user friendly and safe. I think it's really interesting, really cool.
Well, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, which is like, oh, if I own the MOR token, I'm getting upside and exposure to all these projects building on Morpheus. Just the way that became with Ethereum, right? You look at ETH accrued more value than every project built on top of it combined, right? Because if you were bullish on these 20 Ethereum projects, you're definitely bullish on Ethereum, right? And they were all using the token for, sending transactions and as money, right? People were using ETH as money. And so to have that duality where you can use more as capital, right, to bootstrap these new projects and get rewarded for it, and you can use more for the compute, right, and access to AI intelligence, like, that's a very interesting duality that you don't see in a lot of projects. And again, to go back to the fact that it's neutral. It's not controlled by any chain. There's no founders, no pre-mine. Like, this is a community project. Anyone who wants to build on it, like, they are the Morpheus community. And you don't need anybody's permission to do it, right? Which is the huge thing. Like, nobody asked to, deploy their smart contract in Ethereum. Nobody's going to ask to deploy their smart agent on Morpheus, right? You're just going to pop it in the registry. It'll become discoverable. Now, the community is still going to be building all these front ends. They're probably not going to, highlight your rug or your Ponzi or any crap like that, right? They're going to do what Uniswap does, right? The protocol is permissionless, but I'm going to highlight the best stuff, right, in the front end that I know is safe for people. And that's important, right? Creating a permissionless system, but building in ways to protect people in the front ends, I think is really important. So no gatekeepers at the protocol level, and you're able to experiment to do anything you want. But here at the application layer, I can make it, country specific or user specific or whatever I need to do. Right? That's the model. That's what you want to do.
Guys, I think this is a good place for us to start to wrap up. So I want to remind our listeners that they can learn more about Morpheus by going to MOR.org. They should follow Morpheus AIs, which is the handle for the project on Twitter. They should follow Johnston EC, which is David's handle, and we'll throw all of that into the show notes. David, thank you so much for joining us. I do have one final question for you to close us out, though. I believe you went to the Decentralized AI Summit recently in New York, and I'm just curious, like, any takeaways that you can share? I'm also wondering if there were any projects or protocols that you anticipate building alongside Morpheus, whether they're using Morpheus or Morpheus is using their protocol.
Sure. It was a really incredible summit, right? This is another one of these community events. This is a nonprofit thing. There were no sponsors paying to speak. It's literally just, here's all the pieces of the tech stack. And I don't want to speak for any of the projects, but I'll say who was there. I mean, it's public, Wayfinder and Loomer and Noun Space was there. The guys from 6079, right, doing proof of inference. There were so many amazing projects there, sort of building out everything from the agents, right? Noose was there talking about their models, right? And they've already launched, subnets on BitTensor, so they're getting into crypto and Web3, right? And this whole intersection between decentralized AI and crypto, right? So all these projects, have something to add to that tech stack. And it is so early. There are no real competitors at this point. Like, we're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar industry with AI the next 10 years. Like, there's so much space for people to build in a collaborative way, especially right now where people are just sort of figuring out where they fit in the tech stack, what network effect they want to build. And I try to remind people, like, Morpheus is that neutral platform for them to do that. You've got compute, great. You can get rewards from Morpheus. You've got agents deployed, great. You can get paid by Morpheus, right? You want to release tools or help build the protocol itself, their reward for coders. Or you have capital and you have some new yield tool, great. Hook that into Morpheus, right? And that's sort of what we need, is one place where people can get capital and compute and distribution and discovery and all of that for these smart agents. So the thing that struck me, though, was how fast it's moving. Like, the first Decentralized AI Summit in Austin was last December. It was only 5 months ago. And at that point, there were a lot of proposals and ideas and, MVPs. And now it's turned into real products, APIs. People are hitting their first 5,000, 10,000 downloads or users, right? So it's gone really quickly from, yes, we need to build this, to it's built. Now, how do we hook it all together, right? That's the stage that we're at right now. I'll be speaking at Consensus. They're having an AI summit. I'm sure there'll be Morpheus and community events around that whole week and a lot of announcements then. But that's the mode it's getting to, which is really exciting, right? It didn't take long to go from papers to MVPs to products and now to scale, right? And that's the race, but I feel really good about the race. I don't think July is impending doom. I think it's a good urgency for all this stuff to get built, hooked together, run in a fully decentralized manner, right? That will allow us to keep building this cool technology, hooking it into crypto, and really opening it up for the first billion users. I really think that's how we get to 1 billion users. This is the interface, this is the technology to pull that off. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting year, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm planning to go down to Cape Canaveral, America's largest spaceport, for the launch of the Morpheus token. So I'm going to be there broadcasting from as close as I can get to the launch pads for the launch. I thought that'd be cool. I've been a space nerd for a long time, so I thought that'd be fun. I think some of the community are going to come out, but yeah, it's going to be a wild few months to see it all come together.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're a talented founder or developer, please consider reaching out to our team at fourthrevolution.capital. And for future episodes of the Edge podcast, please check out our link tree at edge_pod.